This is Surviving as a Civilian. I am your host, Scott. With the help of my friend Andrew, we created this podcast to share success stories of combat veterans and how they overcame the challenges of returning back to civilian life. These are actual stories told by actual veterans. Content warning, this podcast talks about war, and some of the stories in this podcast contain graphic events of violence and may contain explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Additionally, these veterans are telling their story of how they recall the events. Some of the details may have changed over time. Welcome to Surviving as a Civilian. I am here with Shane Zayac. I got that right? Nailed it, huh?
Nailed it.
How you doing, Shane?
Absolutely nailed it. I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
Good. Thank you for asking. I'm very excited about this interview with you because you are the first non-Army person that we have on this podcast.
Yes, that's what I hear. I'm excited to be here.
Yep. So we'll just get into it. Speaking of which, what branch of the military did you serve in then?
So I was 6 years active Air Force.
Okay. Why'd you decide to go to the Air Force?
So after high school, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, got there in third grade and graduated in 2003. So after high school, I was running around, working at Subway at some point. I gave college a shot and pretty much had to drop all my classes before I failed them. So I needed to get my ass kicked after high school pretty much. And my father was prior Air Force and my grandfather was prior Air Force. So my dad just kind of sat me down one day and was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I have no idea. And he was like, well, how about you join the Air Force? And that's all she wrote. And then I joined.
Okay. And what year was that?
That was, so I got in 2005, okay. October 2005.
And I'm not familiar with the Air Force, but what job, are you allowed to pick jobs? I know certain branch.
Yeah, so I did the ASVAB. I originally had a civil engineering slot, but your good friend Andrew Collis, I actually, before I was about to leave, I went down to visit him in Florida and ended up breaking my hand in a mishap, and so I lost that slot.
What was the mishap?
From there, it was alcohol involved. I thought I was Bruce Lee for a second, thought I could break a piece of wood like 2x4 with my fist, and it didn't work at all. So I got a compound fracture in my hand, and I had to go up to my recruiter and let him know. So that slot came and went. I lost that one. So after that, I had to go up to MEPS, and I was just essentially waiting for someone to drop out so I could jump in their slot. And the first one that became available was air transportation. It was a 2T2, is the AFSC.
So explain to everybody, what is air transportation?
Sure. So there's a bunch of components with it. There's ramp, there's passenger service, fleet, and ATOC. And it's basically dealing with loading of passengers and cargo, anything that's involved to make that happen. That's what we did on the flight line. So we were loading pallets, passengers. We were the eyes and ears on the flight line. And yeah, we lived on the flight line pretty much.
So are you the guys that have the C-17s and C-130s and stuff, and we all get on, you load up all the cars? Okay, gotcha. Makes sense now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So did you deploy?
I did, yeah.
Where'd you deploy to?
I went to Aliyah Salim 3 times. All 3 times I went to the Aliyah Salim in Kuwait.
How long are your deployments?
So the first one was, let's see here. The first one I think was 9 months, but then they cut it back to 6 months for the second 2.
Okay.
So we got it was, compared to you guys, we were there for about half the time in dorms and all the typical stuff you hear about the Air Force. There's some truth to it as far as the comfortable living and all that great stuff.
So how does the structure work there? How do you? I noticed you guys were at Al Salim and you guys put people on planes and cargo on planes and stuff like that, though. But how does it? Who's in charge of that group?
So we had squadrons, and we have a squadron commander, but each branch of air transportation, you have your own little unit. So each section, whether it be ATOC, ramp, passenger service, you'll have your authority that climbs up the regular hierarchy.
Did you see some funny stuff, crazy stuff deployed?
Yeah, I saw a camel spider. I think it was the second deployment. I saw a camel spider in action on the flight line, and those things they're fucking huge.
Terrifying. They are terrifying.
Oh yeah. And he was quick. I mean, we were loading, I think we were finishing up a C-17 in Kuwait, and we were pushing on the last pallet, and I saw something kind of flutter in the side of my vision, and I look, and I swear, from where I was, this thing looked like the size of a dog, and it was insanely fast. It was terrifying. Yeah.
So you guys pushed everybody through there, huh?
Oh yeah. Did you go through Kuwait?
Yes.
Al Salim? Yeah. So that's
yes.
Yeah. So that was essentially the main aerial hub. If you were going further down range, Al Salim was kind of the main central port to get you guys down further.
So hot there.
Mm-hmm.
Not sexy.
Yeah,
I'm like,
right. Yeah, very not sexy.
No, bunch of sand flying all the time, just dry heat.
Yeah, the hottest I saw it get on the flight line was 142 degrees out there. That was the record we saw.
So where were you stationed back in the States then? I don't understand how the Air Force deploys.
So we did, well, first I was stationed in California at Travis Air Force Base. That was my first base, and that's where I stayed the whole time. Our deployment buckets went in, we would be stateside for a year and a half, and then we would deploy. And that was kind of the routine. You'd deploy, come back, stay a year and a half, deploy again. And yeah, I was in 6 years, and I fit in 3 deployments.
It's a lot. Did you have family at the time?
You mean like a wife and kids?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, good for you.
I did not.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Did you
I didn't have to.
Did you end up getting hurt over there?
I did, yeah, actually on my first deployment. There was an incident with a fellow airman. And yeah, I guess I'll just kind of break it down and dive right into it.
Please do. Just so you know, Andrew wanted me to ask you specifically about this.
Yeah. And yeah, he told me about that too. So yeah, my first deployment, my first experience over there. So in Kuwait, the flight line initially was ran by the Army as far as, the terminal and getting guys to the flight line to get on their planes and all that stuff. So when we came in there on that first deployment, we were transitioning, we were taking over the air terminal from the Army. So we pretty much had to build a functioning terminal from the ground up. And we were all kids, I mean, I was, 20 at most. And, it was an A1C, which is an E3. And as far as experience, all of our leadership during that time was reservists. And they were really good guys. But as far as, working a fully functional, busy terminal, we didn't have too much faith in their kind of ability to control that madness, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So it was basically, long story short, it was very stressful. 12-hour days, no days off. And we had to build this system. And it was us kids that had to do this, coming from Travis, which is Travis is like the main aerial port to get anywhere over the Pacific. So we know what a busy flight line looks like and what a lot of missions coming in and out looks like. So in Kuwait, when we had to take that over from the Army, it was Travis times a million as far as the amount of moving pieces, the amount of troops, cargo, all that stuff. So in that time, as we're, trying to structure this new terminal out there, there was a friend of mine that we worked together back in California. We knew each other very well. We were friends. That's what I guess you could consider us. So throughout the time of working in this new terminal, there was a seat at the counter we just called the hot seat. And basically you sat there and your job was to get yelled at by the top brass, like 24/7. Either if a plane got delayed or you'd have to announce any bad news that was going on. And then you would just have to stand there and there would be a line of 100 soldiers, troops, whatever. And you would just get shredded as far as complaints and
Wait,
that
Shane. So you guys, you knew it was going to come, and whoever drew the shortest straw just had to sit in that hot seat.
Pretty much.
Oh man. So like anytime a flight got delayed or somebody lost their IBA or whatever.
Any little thing, the hot seat had to take the heat.
Did you have to sit there ever?
Yes. And that's kind of the beginnings of this incident that had happened. So I was at the hot seat pretty regularly and I was getting kind of used to it, but, at a certain point, the workload was just ridiculous for one person to have to bear.
You're saying the hot seat was getting too much to bear?
Oh yeah, the hot seat was getting a little too hot. Yeah. So the friend of mine from Travis, he was in dispatch, and one day it was crazy. I needed help out dealing with all the, the status updates and talking to, commanders and all this type of stuff. So I go back into dispatch and he's sitting there. He's got a movie on his laptop. I think he was watching The Goonies or something. And I told him, I'm like, dude, you got to get out here and help me. Like, there's way too many top brass out here. There's way too many problems going on for you to be in here, with the Goonies on a laptop. And he turned to me and said, he's like, I didn't get assigned to that position. That's your job, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, and we were the same rank. He might have been an E4 and I was an E3. So it's basically, we're in the same boat still, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then I was just like, as a friend, come out here and, take on some of this heat out here just to try to smooth things over. So he refused, and we got through the end of the day, and we had to take a bus back to our dorms from the flight line in Kuwait. It was about a half-hour drive to get to the terminal, back to our dorms. And that situation kept getting brought up. I mean, I'd say I was provoking it a little bit just because I was irritated as hell. And I was just talking trash pretty much. I was like, I can't believe you did me like that. Like, we're supposed to be boys, all this type of stuff. And it started escalating. And I always, going back to the leadership that was out there, we had 2 supervisors in the bus at that point, riding back to the dorms. And that's right there is where leadership could have squashed it between me and him. But it just kept escalating. There was no stopping it because we were both getting super angry at each other. And I mean, just the stress and the heat, we were kind of taking all the built up anger and just throwing it at each other. So that was getting elevated. We get back to the dorms, and then when you get back, everybody goes to the smoke pit, right? We got a smoke pit right outside of the dorm. So me and him were both out there, and we kind of tried to squash it. You know, we were like, dude, I'm sorry, it's just stressful. Like, but and then I was like, you know, but you still kind of fucked me over. And then from there, it started escalating again, and it started getting physical as far as shoving. So and there was a lot of people out at the smoke pit, which will make sense in a minute, but he shoved me, I shoved him back, and yeah, we were throwing punches at after the shoving. We were kind of trading punches, and someone came in between us and split us up, and that's when he took out a Gerber knife, which, you know, is about a 4-inch blade, something like that. He flicked it open, and I was standing there, and I was just dumbfounded because and to this day, he was showing off for the people that were outside. He was trying to look like badass. I don't know what he was doing, but I was standing there, and I'm like, what are you going to stab me? And then sure as shit, he lunged forward, pushed me up against the wall in the back of the dorm, and put the Gerber into my chest. It punctured my left lung. I had a pneumothorax, where, you know, basically a collapsed lung. So as soon as he did that, I looked down and I'm just covered in blood from my upper torso completely down. It's just gushing out of my uniform. And I went into shock, I think pretty much immediately, but I looked at him, and it took him a second, but he realized what he did. I saw this kind of wave of terror go over his face when he realized that he just stabbed me, and like, it's serious. It's not like he didn't just cut me. He didn't, you know, give me a scrape. Like, he plunged a Gerber knife into my chest. So at that point, you know, he's like trying to help me, like put a towel and just do all sorts of like buddy care, medical, whatever. At that point, I knew how screwed he was. And I'm like, you just fucked up very bad. So from there, I'm sitting in the hall of the dorm, just gushing blood. The ambulance is on its way. And that's when, you know, the oxygen's really tightening up in my lung. At that point, any breath kind of in or out was starting to hurt significantly. So I got ambulanced over to the hospital in Kuwait, but they needed to put a chest tube in, and they didn't have the tools to do it at the base. So I had to get, I went to the helipad in Kuwait and had to get helicoptered over to Arifjan, which is that Navy base, down the way. Took about, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes in a helicopter over there. And during the helicopter ride, that's when I couldn't breathe, like in or out. And that was, I remember about 10 minutes into that flight, I was accepting death. I was like, this is, I can't walk away from this. Like, I cannot breathe in or out. The last thing I remember was getting rolled in from the helipad at Arifjan into the hospital. I remember a couple seconds of that. And then I woke up 3 days later with a chest tube in at Arifjan in the Navy hospital. And that was that.
I don't think that was that. Where did you do your recovery at?
So I was at that Navy hospital for about 2 weeks. But after the chest tube got put out, they stitched me back up. I was right back on the flight line, man. I went back to Ali Salim. They put me on a different shift of this guy, and I just worked the rest of my deployment.
I'm sorry, say that again. So you got stabbed in the chest and had a collapsed lung, and they put a tube in you for 2 weeks and stitched you up and put you back on the line?
That's it. And that, along with the prescription of about 90 Percocet.
What happened to the guy?
So there was a court-martial, and here's the thing. Because we were friends, and I wasn't trying to end this kid's life when it came to his future. And when I gave my statement, basically it was coming off like it was an accident. He didn't mean to do it. I was provoking it, that kind of thing. So he got charged with criminal negligence instead of, like attempted murder.
Because of you. Thing. Because of what you said.
Because of my statement. Yeah. And a lot of people are saying you should have just buried him. Like he should have got what he deserved. So he got a BCD, bad conduct discharge, and he did about 6 months confinement, I believe. So he was in a cell in Kuwait for a while, and then he went back stateside and did the rest of his time at Leavenworth.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I've let go of a lot of that, as far as it was weird that, because I don't know if this happens to you, but when serious things, when a life or death situation kind of happens and shit really hits the fan, it's almost like time slows down completely.
Right.
And I was very calm, and I think a lot of that was due to the shock, like waiting for the ambulance and stuff like that. It felt like I was the only one not freaking out. You know what I mean? So, but, down the road, it was always in my head as like, that was like on that helicopter ride, I was done. I was ready to not make it, So it still is in my head every once in a while, but the older I get, the more I just look at it as kind of like a series of unfortunate events. And I pulled through. So there's kind of only one way to go. and that's forward.
That is crazy. So, did you end up? Do you get does the Air Force have a Purple Heart?
Yeah, but it wasn't because I believe for a Purple Heart it has to be bloodshed because of enemy fire or something. I don't know. That got brought up a little bit, but and I'll tell you one thing. And that was kind of the beginning of me viewing the Air Force in a different light. I mean, I owe a lot to the Air Force. It matured me very quickly. It gave me great experience, but when I saw how fast they tried to sweep that whole thing under the carpet, like they just wanted it to go away and get me back on the flight line, that left a bad taste in my mouth as far as, staying in or any of that type of stuff.
So that was your first deployment?
First deployment, yep.
Nothing else after that, though, happened. The other two, right?
No, nothing major. That stabbing was kind of that took the cake as far as the craziness that happened over there.
So how did you, when you come back from the deployment, how did you recover from it? I mean, was there still treatments for it?
Yeah, I had some, I still have kind of scarring on that tissue. But, I don't know. When I got back, I just, they said I didn't have to do PT for a while, and then that ran out, and then I was just kind of back at it, like nothing happened.
But there was no behavioral health type help that they were trying to give you for this?
No, they kind of, when it comes to that stuff, you really have to kind of hunt it down. The resources are there type of thing, but if you don't, you have to find it. You know what I mean? Like and that's what's kind of spooky about that, because I've seen a lot of guys whose perception is kind of flawed as far as they don't think that they need help, but that's because it's in their head that they're fine. When you look at them from the outside, they need help, but if you don't take yourself to the resources, you're not going to get it. I just never, it's weird to say, but I just essentially brushed it off and just finished out my enlistment.
So speaking of which, do you think that some of those signs were in the guy that stabbed you? Do you think, like, looking outside, looking in, you think that maybe he was showing signs that he was about to snap, or you think he just fucked up?
I think he fucked up, and he knew it immediately. As soon as we both looked down, and I'm just covered in blood, he's back into reality. Like, oh my God! And then his brain started going like, holy shit! I almost just killed my friend. And I'm deployed, and I'm about to get in serious trouble. I view it more as a schoolyard fight type of thing that got way out of hand. It could have that's where leadership needed to step up on that bus and squash it with the both of us right there.
You ever talk to that guy now?
No, we haven't. Now he was at the base after, and we crossed paths a couple times after that. And it was, we just didn't speak of it.
Huh.
Yeah, it was an odd thing to have to have that kind of experience with someone, and then it's just life goes on, and still in the same boat type of thing.
So how long did you do in the Air Force? 6 years, you said?
6 years, yeah.
What'd you do when you got out?
So when I got out, my plan was to use the GI Bill, get my 4-year degree. I had a sister that moved down to North Carolina from New York, and when I got out, I just didn't want to go back up to the snow that is Buffalo. So I figured I had a sister that lives in North Carolina. I'll give North Carolina a shot. Got my, I hit the ground running with school and the GI Bill. The GI Bill is amazing. If anybody is not using that and you have the ability to do so, you just have to take advantage of that. That is the one takeaway benefit that is really, really helpful. So I got my 2-year degree and then transferred to NC State and finished out my undergrad in psychology.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do now?
So I'm in sales right now. I do home renovation projects, pretty much, like windows, doors, siding, outside sales. So I run, appointments at homes or businesses, and we take care of whatever needs to be done on the exterior of a home or a building.
So I'm not familiar with. I know what the Army system is for transitioning out of the military. What's the Air Force system like?
So we did. You have a 2-week course, or was it even? It might have been a week or two. There was some acronym for it. I can't remember what it was. There's an acronym for everything. TAPS. That's what it was. Transition something was the class that you go to, and I guess it's geared to prepare you, for getting back into the civilian world. None of us took it seriously going through it. It was just something we had to show up to, and that was it. Once you're done, you're done.
So Shane, let me ask you though. So this is kind of a thing with the Army too. The people that get out before they hit the 20 years or retirement time frame, they say that they didn't put a lot of effort into the retirement program. Do you think had you put effort into it, it would have made a difference, or is it just a kind of the check a block thing?
You're saying like if I was more assertive during that TAPS class?
Yes.
No. I mean, the major thing that's going to help you and guide you through those things is going to be going through it. You can prepare all you want. They did like resume writing, all that stuff. But yeah, it was just checking boxes. We just had to get through it to get the signature on the paper and get out. And I was, let's see. So I was 25, 26 when I got out. Actually, 24, 25. So at that age, I was just, excited to get out. And I had all these ideas of, a path I could take and all that stuff. But I'll tell you, using the GI Bill and taking classes with, 18, 19-year-olds, there was a feeling of I'm back to square one. And not only that, but like people my age that weren't in are far ahead of me as far as where we're at in the civilian world when you first get out. I didn't relate to pretty much anybody because with the GI Bill, you physically have to go to class for I believe it's 90% of the classes you have to actually be in a classroom for. So you have to, and I mean, you could take night classes, I guess, but yeah, I was in with the youngins going through school at step one, and throughout that process, there was a lot of regret that came up, thinking, you know, the military just kind of feels like my life was put on pause for 6 years, and now I'm right back out, like I just graduated high school.
Yeah, I bet.
You know,
where are you at now then? So where are you at with the whole thing now? Would you do it all over again if you had the chance?
Yes, I would.
Why is that?
So the person that it developed me into, I would do over and over and over again. I think the key to growing as a person and maturing as a functioning adult is experience, and you won't get the type of experiences that you'll get when you're, say, thrown into a deployment, or the stress of the workload, or, you know, loading multi-million-dollar aircraft with crucial cargo. There was a lot of responsibility put in our hands, in the hands of 20-year-old kids. And that definitely helped shape me into the person I became. I wouldn't trade that for anything. I'd do that over and over again.
Do you still get seen by the VA?
What's that? I didn't catch that.
Do you still get seen by the VA?
Yeah. So when I got to North Carolina, I went into the VA, gave them my medical records. We went over the whole pneumothorax thing and, you know, tinnitus and all that stuff. I'm at a point now where, you know, I don't necessarily have to go to the VA that much. And I also have, you know, insurance through my job that I have now. So I haven't had to utilize the VA as much as, you know, older veterans or serious kind of issues that would arise, you know, from truly being in combat. I know, you know, my instance was rare, and, you know, where we were at in Kuwait, we didn't see any combat. Our job was to load up the other branches to get further down range. So someone who's coming back with severe PTSD, or, you know, saw a lot of combat and saw a lot of intense things, I wouldn't necessarily say that I would have to utilize the VA as much as someone in that position would.
Hmm.
Yep. Well, I've been into the VA, and I still check in with a social worker and stuff like that, just to kind of talk through, you know, like instances like those, like when I was in the helicopter and how I was, you know, almost too comfortable with dying. Like, that was a weird thing that that kept with me. I was to the point where I accepted if I was going to die, just because I was done. Like, I didn't want the workload, the stress, the heat, the fight, everything. I was just like, yeah, just let me tap out here, and I'll be okay with that. So that was something that kind of stuck with me, and I talked through that. I'll check in with a social worker every once in a while and go over some of those things. but yeah, as far as like the VA system itself, other than that, I don't have too much experience, I'd say, with major needs. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because I know, man, I hear the stories and the trouble and the hurdles you have to get through to get help. But as far as my position and what I would need to utilize the VA for, I mean, it's still the hurry up and wait thing, but I can't kind of give a true, opinion on the structure of the VA as a whole.
Right. So
yeah,
a little bit different. So if you knew of an airman, Army guy, Navy, Marine, whoever was getting out, what advice would you give them right now? Looking back at young Shane.
Well, it would depend on the circumstances that they're in. If they have a family and kids, you gotta have a plan, like just anything, one plan, even if it's just the GI Bill, or if you got a job lined up, because I got swallowed up, man. When I got out and I was kind of just floating in the sea of the unknown, not knowing, what the hell I'm going to do. I just felt like, and going back to how I felt like I had to start over at square one with the younger kids in college. When you lose that sense of purpose that you have in the military, and all of a sudden it feels like you have none, you just have to do something, because you can get swallowed up in that isolation, and that's not a fun pass for sure. You'll beat yourself up, have a lot of regret, and the woulda, coulda, shouldas. So I would just say, if you're getting out, at least have one thing that you're trying to shoot for, no matter what it is. You got to sustain the purpose that keeps you moving forward.
Have you experienced some of the darker times since you've been out?
I have, yeah. Going back to it just feels like you don't have a role. You don't necessarily relate to the people you're around. You feel like you're behind the curb. You're not at the same point in life that a lot of people your age are at that point. And it feels like you got a lot of catch up to do. And sometimes, when it's hard to relate to your surrounding, it's easy to get trapped in your own head. And that's when the self-destructive tendencies tend to come out, when you just beat yourself up over your choices and your isolation kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, that's so one of the things with this podcast we're trying to do is we're trying to talk to, just bring awareness to any kind of veteran, whether it be Air Force, Army, whatever, to like, there are success stories. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can go through hell and come back out of it on top.
Absolutely. Yep. And going through that hell and reaching a point to where you feel you've succeeded makes the fruits of that labor that much more worthwhile. The fact that you had to climb back up, behind the curb, or had to climb back up from a hell that you were experiencing, And look at you now. You're still here.
Still standing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important to do. I really appreciate you taking the time to tell your story, Shane.
Yeah, man. I think it's a great thing you're doing.
Yeah.
I think in my experience and some of the friends that I have that are veterans, it's hard for us to seek out help or even admit that we need help.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's and I've lost a couple friends that I was in the military with because they, you know, the struggle just got too much for them, and it wasn't. And I'm saying, coming from the Air Force and, you know, not even seeing the true hell of combat and the war that's going on, just the transitioning alone, going from everything you're used to in the military to being left to your own devices, that alone can be a huge burden to bear by yourself. So it's crucial to have, you know, that an idea or a goal you push for when you get out, and it's crucial to let people in.
And it's not if you need help, call somebody. It doesn't have to be the veteran suicide hotline. You can call a friend.
You're right.
You can call just somebody. And if you're on the other end, it's crucial to pick up. Like, you know, you get those pain in the ass friends that are like crybabying about their life, but you know, as a fellow veteran, you owe it to them to pick up that phone.
Absolutely. And it can get, you know, it can get odd because two guys might be going through the same thing, where if someone's calling you, it's hard for you to pick up the phone.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But to just be able to get some of those thoughts out and not keep, you know, all that, whatever it may be, negativity, stress, trauma, if that's all inverted and that's all in your head, it will build and it will grow, and
it'll
it can
take
turn out really bad.
And lower and lower until either you get help or...
For sure. Yeah. And it might get to a point where it's, you know, you make a temporary solution or a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Right. Yep. So that's what we're trying to do with this, Shane. Your story is crazy. I can't wait till people get this.
For sure.
Thank you for taking time. And like I always say, if you need help, get help. If you can give help, give help.
Absolutely.
All right. I appreciate it, Shane.
You got it. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yep.
This is a great thing you're doing.
Thank you. Before I go, on behalf of Andrew and I, we would like to thank all the veterans we talked to for taking the time to share their stories with us. We created this podcast to show not just the military, but everyone, that you can make it through some of the toughest times in your life and come out on the other side on top. Here at Surviving as a Civilian, we cannot stress enough the importance of getting help if you need it, or giving help if you can. Sometimes it could be as simple as making a phone call or answering that phone in the middle of the night from someone you haven't heard from in a while. If you or someone you know is struggling, help is available at the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or text the word HOME to 741-741. If you think your story can help someone out and you want to share it with us, please email us at survivingasacivilian.casting@gmail.com. Subscribe and rate this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcast. Like and follow Surviving as a Civilian on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Until next time, get help if you need it, or give help if you can.